Hey everybody, today we are going to go over some of the new features of Holley's new EFI V6 Build 300. So I'm going to open up V6 Build 300. I just want to let y'all know I've been running this for a while. I've had no problems with it. I've had no issues. I've been beta testing this for a while and it's been pretty jam up. So they introduced a lot of new features in V6 Build 300, and they introduced even more new features in Terminator X Build V3. I'm going to make separate videos on Terminator X to cover that kind of stuff. So I'm going to focus on V6 Build 300 right now. So if you've watched some of my other videos, you're probably noticing that this over here looks a little different. So I've already made a video that'll get released at the same time as this about this screen right here, test output pins, and I've already made a video about this right here, the dashboard, that'll get released at the same time as this. So I wanted to show you some other stuff that they've added in here. So one of the big things that a lot of people had asked for was Lambda. So let's go to the fuel ICF. This is my VE table for the car, or for my convertible. But let's go over here to target air fuel ratio. So here's our target air fuel ratio. So there's a couple things that you're going to notice that are a little bit different here. First thing to notice is that it is now 2 spots after the decimal point. So before we used to only be 3.4, now we're 3.43. So we have a little bit more accurate reading of air fuel and a little bit more accurate targeting of air fuel. But there's something else up in here, and that is this right here in Lambda. Okay, so there we are in Lambda. So these are our Lambda values. If you're not familiar with Lambda, this isn't the video to explain Lambda, but the guys that asked for Lambda wanted this. So I'm going to show you what you can do with this and how this works. So you can always transfer over and look right back at air fuel. I'm not really a Lambda person, but basically what Lambda is it's one is equal to the Stoich value of every fuel. So this is methanol, the Stoich value is 6.42. If we go back into our system ICF and we change the fuel type from methanol over to gasoline, it's going to say, would you like to convert the target air fuel based on the new fuel type? Let's go ahead and hit yes. You don't have to, but go ahead and hit yes. Okay, so now we go over here to fuel, we go back to target air fuel, and there's Lambda is 14.7. So obviously, if you tune gasoline stuff and methanol stuff right now, this is way rich. But you can offset the entire table in Lambda if you wanted to, or you can offset the entire table in air fuel. It gives you a way to convert back and forth between the three different fuel types, and you can go to E85, hit yes, and it'll do the same thing here for you as well. So there you go. There's your Lambda values, and then there it is in E85 scaling for air fuel. So that's a pretty cool little feature that they put in there. Added Lambda in there. It's something. It's not for everybody. I'm not really a huge Lambda person again, but I mean, it is what it is, and some people will like it, some people won't. So I definitely thought that we should definitely look at it though. But here we are. We're back at methanol, and we're back to the target air fuel ratios that I wanted. I ran this thing pretty rich. Obviously, we're down to 3.3, 3.4. Well, we never made it up to that much boost, but where we race the car out, we're right around 3.6, 3.7 air fuel, right around here. So the next thing they did with fueling, this is pretty neat. If you go to base fuel, if you've got if you're used to looking at your old screen, you'll notice that this right here is a lot easier to read. So this is actually pretty nice, right? It's like this is a dark blue with like a yellow background here. So you can actually read this when it's bright outside. They added another nice little feature here, and that is this little box right here. Click on this, and it highlights the entire screen. So it's kind of nice if you wanted to select all and then make a big offset for the entire table. You could. It's a nice little function right there. Then if we go over here to custom injectors, we have, if you've watched my other videos on how to use 2 sets of fuel injectors or 3 sets of fuel injectors, you know about this. But if we look at this is set 2 in my car, which is 220 pound per hour injectors. And then set 3 is 600 pound per hour injectors. We can look at the differences now 4 different ways, right? So we can look at this in base percentage, in fuel flow, in injector duty cycle, and the new one that they added is pulse width, right? So if we look at this in pulse width, we can look at what the pulse width would be for that injector. So obviously we have no pulse width here because we don't plan on using that injector at all. Same thing here, we'd have 0 pulse width down here. So this is useful for big injectors, right? Because you have a minimum pulse width for every injector. So when it comes to blending injectors, this makes life a little bit easier. So the minimum pulse width on the injectors that I use is right around 1.5, 1.6 milliseconds. So we're actually a little under right here. The good news is that for the tune-up that's in this car right now, is that we're not ever really here. We usually go straight over to here and go straight up and boost, and we're climbing right along the pulse width. That is making that injector happy. So that's a good way to spot check a potential problem by being able to look at it in pulse width. So if you've got a car that's sitting there idling at too low of a pulse width on too big of an injector and it starts losing cylinders, this is a good spot to come and look at it and see why. So those are some of the fueling changes, and again, you've got that same box where you can click down here and select the entire screen. Those are some of the fueling changes that they added to V6 Build 300. I think they're useful. The Lambda guys should be happy. The all the guys that are tuning multiple fuels should be happy about it. Having that extra point in an air fuel ratio, and then also having the ability to look at it in pulse width, I think is a pretty big deal. So it's rather helpful. Some of the other things that they've added with V6 300, we'll get into them. It won't just be fuel. They've also added, if we go into system ICF and then ignition parameters, go to configure, they've added right there Ford 58X Godzilla. So there's Godzilla engine support right here. And then let's see here. We've also got, if we go under sensors, we've got, they've reorganized the map sensors. I believe they've added, let's see here. Yeah, Ford 7.3 coolant temp, so like the Godzilla 7.3 coolant temp sensor. Same, oh no, not the Ford. They did it with, I believe, oil pressure maybe. Yeah, Ford 7.3 oil pressure sensor here, so it's already in the drop down. So that's a nice feature. As well as other inputs, they've added some pretty, so let's go over here, we'll look at this one. Let's enable an input, make it a 5 volt. They've added a couple other 5 volt inputs on the list. So this is already a really extensive list, but they added 3 things that I wind up using quite a bit. It's almost like I asked for this. Race pack vacuum sensor, which seems to be one of the hardest things to ever scale. So they've added that, right? So inches of vacuum. They added the AM 12 position trim pot. So those 12 position switches I've made a video on in the past. They added that in a pre-configured input, which is nice. And then they also added the Mad Racing Products laser ride height sensor. I use them on quite a bit of stuff, quite a bit of cars. Really like those ride height sensors. They work great. And now they have added them in the drop downs already for input configuration. So let's take a look at what else they've added, right? So let's look at the README file here. We've gone over the Godzilla support. There's another video strictly dedicated to pin map testing right here. Let's look at that. I know what we need to look at. Let's look at, if we go to data log, let's open up a data log and let me show you that. Actually, you know what? Wait, we'll make a different video just on data logs. If you go to data view, gauge panel, hit edit, you now have the ability to, you can hide inactive. So if we hit uncheck hide inactive, it brings up all the things that are inactive in this global file. So there's a lot more stuff to scroll through when all the inactive stuff is shown. If we hide inactive, we are getting rid of it. It's just out of the way, so we can go right to what we're looking for. We can also, instead of the standard sorting of this, we can sort it alphabetically, right? So all your numbers are first, and then it starts at A and ends with, well, in this case W, but normally Z. Another cool thing about this is if we wanted to search, we could search for, let's say, dome, right? So dome PSI, target dome, and then we can click it. We can grab a hold of this, click and drag it. If we didn't already have it there, here we go, target dome. Well, I'm wrong. I've already got it there, but we can click, drag, and drop it right here in the target dome. So it makes it easier if you've got a list in your head of what you want in one of these windows, instead of having to scroll through all this stuff and try to find what you want. You can just search for what you're looking for. So that's a very nice feature. Big fan of that. Makes my life a lot easier when we're setting up cars. Instead of having to scroll through and try to go through all the nitrous ICF and all that kind of stuff, makes life a little bit easier. So go ahead. Yeah, sure, we'll save it. So that brings us some good features that makes life a lot easier to actually use the product with, use the software with. Anything that makes user interface better or easier, in my opinion, is better. Let's see, we've got Control P, so it's a shortcut. It'll give you properties of your global file. So if you hold down Control and then you hit the P button, it'll bring you up global file properties. Nice for adding notes. So when changing fuel types, the software will now offer to update the target air fuel ratio of the base tables for you as appropriate. There it is. We were talking about pulse width right there. Data logger now has the option to hide comparison log lines. Well, we're going to look at data logger in a different video. There's another one. Let's look at that. If you've used the shift or the race trans ICF in your Dominator, you have probably fell victim to this. So shift output setup, the shift master enable. So previously you had to have an input going to your ECU to let the ECU know that you wanted a master enable for the shift function to actually work. So if I click on this, you go to pin map, there's my shift master enable. Now we have the option to not need that, right? So there it is. There's a line right through it for shift master enable. So if you didn't want to run an input to the ECU for shift master enable, you don't need to anymore. Very nice. The guys with HPs really appreciate that because you don't have the room for an input. That was a big move for all the guys with the HPs. And for Terminator X, because y'all get that too now. So they renamed it fixed orders of map sensors. Yep. Okay. So let's look at 1D graphs now. So let's look at boost versus time. It should be in here. So again, now it's a lot easier to actually read what we have here, right? But notice this. This is a linear scale with even breakpoints from 0 to 8.1 seconds, okay? In blue, down here, like what I'm clicking on, is the actual times that I'm selecting, right? Like the ones that like I've keyed in. So if we change this to, let's just say 10 seconds, notice it'll scale it out evenly out to 10 seconds. If we change it to 5 seconds, it scales it out to 5 seconds, right? So even breakpoints from 0 to 5 seconds, even though we have different breakpoints here. So if you were to right click and uncheck space x-axis evenly, there you go. There's this lines up, these values here, the graph itself lines up with these values here. If you were to space x-axis evenly, they line up with here, right? So hopefully that makes sense. It's a nice little feature. I'm a big fan of them changing the colors of this stuff because it can get very difficult to read some of this stuff sometimes. If we look at advanced tables, they did the same thing here. So if we enable this table, they did the same thing here. And this is because this is just spaced. Notice the spacing is different, right? So 0.4, what is that, 0.5 instead of 0.8 right here, 1.2, 1.6. So the spacing is a little bit different. This is what I've keyed in. This is if it was spaced evenly. So pretty nice to be able to view it both ways. So hopefully that helps some of you guys to further advance your tuning careers or your racing programs. And they've also added the addition to 1 to 100% for TPS-based boost modulation. So if we go to the boost ICF, Previously, the minimum value you could key in here was 50%. Now you can key in 1%. So the moment it goes over 1%, it will go to it'll start to modulate for boost control. So that's kind of nice. I don't know why you would. I don't use it. Just being 100% honest, I don't use TPS-based boost modulation. I use a master enable, and then it doesn't matter if you pedal it or not. It's going to follow the curve that I want it to follow. So that's just the way I go about doing it. So those are a lot of the features that have been added to V6 Build 300. Next video I'm about to make is going to be on data logs and reviewing data logs with V300 or V6 Build 300 software, and how much nicer it is now because the colors are now set to the way we want them. So hold tight, and we'll whip up a video on that.